When we come to our next panelist, I'm very, very pleased that we have somebody representing the rail sector, Dr. Golda Chimere-Dan, because rail has become such an important subject. If you consider that Africa has stranded resources, think of Tet and think of a good example is Simandou in Guinea-Conakry, where there's a lot of iron ore, some of the best in the world, but they can't move it unless that railway is done. And the routing of the railway is what's the big arguments about. So does it go through Port Buchanan? Does it go through the new port near Conakry? What is the story? So rail is the only way you can mass transport the rail commodities. There's a swathe of iron ore projects in Central and West Africa that depend very much on the rail. In fact, companies have even pulled out because of the rail problem in the past, and then come back in again. But with the low commodity prices and so on at the moment, everything's we're sitting on our hands a lot, but nevertheless, and not only with regard to the mining commodities, I was in Addis, as I said earlier, recently, and saw the Chinese-built rail line, Urban Rail. And urban rail is another thing that's going to become more dominant. I mean, talking about it in Zambia, they're talking about it in Kenya, talking about it in several countries. So urban rail is definitely something for the future. So Golda, if you'd like to address us on this very important subject. Thank you.
Thank you very much, yeah. Thank you, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I come from Africa Speed Rail, a company that was put in place in 2014 to coordinate the implementation of West Coast High-Speed Rail project. The West Coast High-Speed Rail project itself is a vision of some West Africans who were already in the rail sector, operating in the rail sector. The need for high-speed rail in West Africa could not just be overemphasized. The movement of people, the movement of goods and services in the region is very slow. Even in a World Bank sponsored survey that was done there, it was found that in 2010, it was found that the delays in movement of people, goods, and services were a critical factor in doing business in the West African region. And so these men came together, put the vision together, driven by the Ghana government. The project then, first and foremost, began by articulating the pre-concept issues, which involved signing a treaty among the participating governments. There are 5 participating governments. The project will run from Lagos to Abidjan, and encompassing the Republic of Benin, Togo, and Ghana in between. And so the company was therefore put together to identify other viable high-speed rail projects in Africa, source finance partners for the projects, and develop the projects, and then operate and maintain them on a regional rollout basis. The features of the project include the fact that it will cover a distance of 1,178 kilometers, and the aim is to provide affordable, cheap transport that is safe and to the customers. Of course, it will provide services for both freight and passenger. As you may well know, the World Bank has been financing the development of the Lagos-Abidjan corridor, and there is in existence already some the road transport corridor, which this project is leveraging on. Like I mentioned earlier, the 5 participating governments signed in 2014 a treaty that enables both the transportation and the road transportation and the rail projects. So we are well within the confines of that treaty to develop this project. It's an environmentally friendly project that will provide travel at a speed of 250 kilometers per hour or more. That's what is envisaged to roll out. It will serve the population of West Africa that is within plus or minus 250 million people. This project will contribute to significant cost reduction in doing business in West Africa. because one, you would now be able to travel from Abidjan to Lagos and do business and go back the same day. That's the aim. So the acceleration of business transactions, movement of goods and services within the region would be the highlight of this project, as well as the convenience, and also opening up the market and transport arteries within the region that will facilitate industrialization, which is the aim of the governments that are participating in the project. At the moment, we completed the pre-feasibility studies in 2015, and it is planned that the feasibility studies will commence in July. For that purpose, we've been negotiating with different finance providers to provide finance for the feasibility studies. Initially, it was a bit challenging because many people want to get involved in the project CapEx without necessarily being involved in the feasibilities. But recently, we were able to find two principal players that are interested in providing the feasibility funding. So by July, we envisage that the feasibilities will commence, and the project phases are right. The phase one then will be the extensive bankable feasibility studies that we aim to complete by 2017. That's next year. And then, of course, pending the reports from the feasibility studies, we'll then enter into a final design and planning stages. And we're looking at contacting or making contacts through a tender process with EPC construction contractors and O&M managers to embark on the project in its third phase. So for now, we are at phase one of the project, which is going to start with the feasibility studies in July, if everything goes as planned. And of course, you know, the bankable feasibility studies were aiming to cover issues like the bankability of the project, the financial viability, the technical feasibility, the political will. We've got very strong political will in the region. We have local community organizations and the kingdoms of West Africa coming together to provide support for the project. The governments have committed, and not only signing the treaty, they've also written us letters of support to provide all necessary permits and whatever else will be required in terms of project support and implementation. And the current road transport activities that are going on, we think is in favor of the project because it will definitely increase the ridership figures that we have estimated for the project. So yeah, that's the West Coast High-Speed Rail project. It's a massive project. Some have described it in terms that are very encouraging because it's going to be an icon of a project that will set up some benchmarks on how you do these things within the region and beyond. And so yes, that's the West Coast High-Speed Rail project, which is the first project of the Africa Speed Rail. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for a most interesting presentation, Golda. I think your project could set the tone, just like the Addis project has set a precedent on this whole idea of urban railway. But yours is more than just urban railway. You're talking about a regional thing. You're talking about high speed. So rail is not just moving commodities. It's quite multifaceted. When I was in Guinea-Conakry, I was with a team of rail specialists. And after a week with them, you pretty much learn a lot about rail, as I had to do a lot of interpreting as well for the meetings. And what fascinated me was bogie technology, what you can do today with bogie technology. With bogie technology, people argue a lot about this standard gauge, the gauge of the railways. and ECOWAS is calling on standard gauge for everybody. So is the East African community. But the other two gauges, standard gauge, Cape gauge, you know, if you have decent, what these experts were trying to tell the Ghanaian government was that with decent bogey technology, you needn't lessen the load. In other words, you don't have to recreate a rail line, which is a pretty expensive exercise. Each kilometer of rail is going to cost you on a good topography between $1 and $2 million. So you're talking about a high capitalization required for such a project. These are very, very expensive projects. But once they're in place, I mean, the benefits are long-lasting and wonderful. One of the worst things we did in this country, in my humble view as a South African, was to allow our rail system to deteriorate so badly. I grew up in a rail age, and I don't see rail today like I did when I was a child. And as you can see, I'm 1,000 years old, so I know these things. Thanks very much for that. West Africa is an absolute terrain of heavy activity in rail. You've got the loop rail system that's going to create a loop right the way through West Africa, and that's a big project. And of course, in Lagos itself, there's been a lot of planning around those urban rail projects for moving the people of Lagos as well.
Doing business in Africa, you can't afford to be without Africa Investor.